Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. I'm your host, Jorge Martin, and then God made light. So, yes, we are light and we are live on YouTube. Please make sure to give us a like and subscribe on the Familia FFB podcast. We got some people already in the chat. So thank you so much, Familia, for joining us. Oh my goodness. Thank you for jumping on on a different night. Thank you, Mr. Scampers. Hola, ¿cómo estás? And DJ Chark all day. Well, we could throw something together on that. And Alberto, muchas gracias. Thank you so much for joining us. Familia, please. Oh, yeah, I mean, you know where to find me. Jorge Martin 17 on Twitter. Remember, we are the Familia FFB podcast is a proud member of the Fantasy Points Media Group. So when you enter Familia 22, Familia 22, if you're talking in English, and you get a 10% off the subscription at fantasypoints.com. And when you go in, you get 10% off the Fantasy Points NFL Prospect Guide. You got 200 plus profiles from Greg Cosell. New ones dropping all the time. Like literally, I heard him talking about players that he was just finishing scouting and putting up there. You got great content from John Hansen, Graham Barfield, Scott Barrett, Joe Dolan, Wes Huber, some of the true G's who are in the Familia, who are in the fantasy industry. So just great guys. You got rank 2023 rankings. You got Debbie rankings, mock drafts, all for $25. And I'm going to get you 10% off. So use that promo code Familia 22. I'm going to drop the promo code a couple times during the show. So Familia, we've been having a lot of fun with a lot of guests, a lot of amigos coming on. We got another one coming on. So, and I don't know if there's anyone who's made me laugh as hard as this man, Kraig Rueth. He is El Rey of the GIF. Or is it GIF? We're going to find out. Some of the times I busted up laughing uncontrollably because these GIFs, they just kind of catch me off guard, and he sends it to a large group, and it just, and no one is safe. And actually you feel a little extra cool when you're a victim, subject, whatever you want to call it. So he's also one of the leading IDP analysts out there, and he's the creative director for Roto Heat Fantasy. He's started creating IDP contract and content not long ago. And he is about to premiere the Player Normal YouTube series that's going to be scarier than LaDainian Tomlinson in 2006 if you had to face him on the other side. So maybe someday we'll be talking about my La Llorona story on there. So yeah, may have touched on it once before, but no, we're gonna give him the full Monty. So we're also gonna check in. Somehow he's a Cowboy fan in Cheesehead country. So you know what? Enough of me talking. Let's bring in mi buen amigo Kraig Rueth. ¿Cómo estás, my friend? Gracias for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and love watching your shows on YouTube and chatting with you over on Twitter. And it's great to be here talking football with you tonight.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. And I do appreciate you've jumped into the chat plenty of times and actually added some life to the party. And it's good. The Front Yard Fantasy folks have jumped on, and I know Mr. Scampers is on there. Thank you everybody for jumping on a different night, because actually, we got Dame Overboard, La Dama, muchas gracias for joining. We jumped on a different night. My daughters had a swim. My twin daughters had a swim meet yesterday. So, we just jumped on. So I think Kraig was able to jump on tonight. So we are about a week out from the NFL draft. So, who else is sick of the NFL, talking about the NFL draft and not knowing where these guys are going? And now, Kraig, how sick are you of hearing that this is a subpar quarterback class?
Completely. We have these years, and I think people get refined. I mean, hopefully we all get more refined over time in how we can, sort of predict these things. But with the human element involved, there's always stuff that we can't predict. We don't know what's going to happen for sure with these players. And we've seen draft classes that at the time, maybe before fantasy football was so into, dissecting every move of it, but that ended up being a lot better than people thought. And ones that people thought were going to be great just end up falling on their faces. So, yeah, there's a little bit of predictiveness that we have to plug into the equation for fantasy football, and we all want to look smart, but at the end of it, there's so much of that human element that we have no way of knowing, no control over at all. So I try not to spend too much time on it. I try to have more fun with it, especially on something like Twitter, than be completely serious, because man, it will wear you down.
And you know what? And it's it's so funny to the way people get crazy about the NFL draft because, I mean, you're right. You're right. It's like I think Peyton Manning said it best. Somebody was pointing out his flaws when he was coming out in this first, in the NFL draft. And this is a guy who's on the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks. And he even said to the scout himself, or it might have been one of the coaches who was reading him his flaws. And it's like, okay, so I'm never going to get any better. Never. So, and that's the thing, I think people underrate how much coaching goes into it, how much, you know, stability in an organization comes into play. I mean, it's just and actually, there's a word that that we say in Spanish called ganas, grit, determination, that kind of thing. You don't really know that from a 40 time. You don't really know that from a 15-minute Zoom session on interviews.
Especially
So
that, yeah.
yeah, it's. I mean, yeah, you could find out from the equipment guy who's the last guy to, if the quarterback is really the last guy to leave, but you know, you don't know if he's actually, watching YouTube videos or actually working at that time. So yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to find out where these guys land and kind of, try and make some predictions that way. I mean, and then just see there. But I want to know, and our guests, our amigos in the chat room, without divulging too much about your debut episode, and actually feel free to talk about when it is, because I know it's coming. What's the premise of the Player Normal series, and can you share the inspiration?
Yeah, so debut episode is tomorrow at 12 Eastern. They're all pre-recorded. The way it's just easier. I like being live on shows, but trying to coordinate things with people's schedules and everything. With the live show that you run yourself, it can be hard for people. So I try to just record them whenever, and then we can edit it a little bit for cutting out when I'm stumbling over my words or something like that, and try to seem pretty on YouTube. So it's being released. I'm aiming for every Friday at 12 Eastern. 12 p.m., so noon Eastern, a release. And I kind of wanted to do my own show, and I've been doing content for about a little over 2 years. I think I started in 2020, in February 2020. And I like doing shows live. IDP shows are all I really do for the shows that I'm on regularly, and I want to do something a little different. But it's like there's so many shows out there. How do you differentiate yourself, and how do I keep it interesting to me? I love talking fantasy football with people, but again, if that's all you pay attention to on Twitter and group chats and all that stuff, it'll bog you down. So I wanted a different element to it. And I'm like, well, what am I interested in that other people are interested in? Well, dinosaurs. There's a limited audience for talking about dinosaurs. True crime. I'm really into that sort of stuff, but that's even a darker topic by and large. And I didn't want to, have that large of a divergence from fantasy football. I'm like, well, I like ghosts and like stories, other paranormal things like Bigfoot. Since a kid, I was interested in that stuff. I'm like, there's a really big following for that. So how do I, split this up, or do I integrate the two? And I'm like, well, the shows are going to be, so far the ones I've recorded, about a half hour each. The first half is generally about a specific player that the guest wants to talk about. They tell me who, I prepare some notes. They got whatever they want to go over. And I'm kind of coming in clean, other than just knowing who they're talking about. I don't know which way generally they feel about them or what they're going to say about them. And we have a 10, 15-minute conversation just about that player going into next season. And then the second part is a personal, preferably, although if people have a historical one that they want to talk about, paranormal experience or story, that we discuss. And it's been nice because they'll tell me the topic ahead of time. Like someone said, hey, I got a haunting story. Great. I don't need to know anything more. I want to be surprised, and we go into it and they tell me, and, ask some questions. And it's just sort of a different, fun little thing to talk to people about, as much as I love fantasy football and chatting with people about that. So, and of course I love dad jokes and plays on words. So player normal activity as opposed to paranormal activity. So, I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. That works for me. So I went with that.
That's awesome. I mean, and honestly, I think anybody can have an experience that they really just can't explain.
Yep.
And I touched on one with you via Twitter. whenever you want to do it, I'm happy to do it because I think it'd be a lot of fun, and it still freaks me out a little bit. In fact, in honor of that legend called La Llorona, and I'll talk about it later. To me, it's one of the scariest legends because it's all about kids, and
Yep.
but what we've come to do, and we did this 2 years ago when we launched Familia FFB. We launched those running backs that are like from the 3rd to the 6th round, that are kind of scary. Yeah, you don't necessarily want to draft them. We
Yep.
call that the La Llorona section. So
That's fitting.
so yeah, it's just one of those things. Yeah, I don't. Oh yeah. So I think sometime after we're done with NFL draft, the Primos and I will get together, and I'll make sure to tag you on it, so you can. I don't know if you want to do a GIF on that one, because that thing is pretty scary.
The photos, well, not necessarily photos, but drawings, interpretations, all that I've seen online, and I've heard stories, because there's podcasts that I listen to where people, it's sort of the same thing. They'll call in and tell their own stories about that, and when they get people calling in, from Mexico or Texas down there with those stories, man, especially because, to your point, kids involved. As a parent, that stuff's even creepier.
It is just creepy. So you just like I actually they came out with the movie probably about 3-4 years ago, and one of my grade school classmates, guy I played Little League with, he actually has done some behind the scenes work on movies, production side, and he actually worked on that movie. And I told him I said I would love to go watch this movie and support you. I think it's great what you've done. I can't for the life of me, because I'm still freaked out from it being a kid. So even though I'm way past being a kid.
That stuff
So
sticks with you. If you have something happen to you, and there's stuff that I had as a kid that was completely explainable now, but I still think back to how it made you feel at the time, and some of that's just like, man, nope, I don't need that again in my life.
nope. So yeah, not looking to relive that. So I can't wait for the debut. Listen right here. We got Player Normal Series debuts 4/22 tomorrow at
Yep,
noon
it's
Eastern
gonna
time.
be. It's Nate Polvote from In Between Media, and you see him all over the place. Does stuff for, I think, Fantasy Pros. He's a great guy, and he was a good sounding board for me when I was just talking about the idea. So he volunteered to come on as my first guest, and it's a good episode. I've seen it.
Oh, Nate's definitely a buen amigo of the show. So yeah, I love listening to him. He's great. He was a guest on here probably about a month ago, right after the free agency craziness came on. So yeah, it's so good. I can't wait to check it out, and make sure you're checking it out on YouTube, familia, and give them a like and subscribe while you're at it. So get in there and like and subscribe our show too, otra vez, por favor. So also, so we've talked, I hinted at it a little bit in the show. So is it GIF or GIF?
So the person who came up with it pronounces it and says it should be pronounced GIF. I think most people say GIF because it's a G, not a J. I guess, to me, I don't care. People know what you're talking about when they're talking about one, so whatever. And I used to be very anal about that sort of stuff, with how things were pronounced and words and all that, and then have a bunch of kids. It's like going to drive yourself insane if you try to sit there and nitpick and get everything corrected. So I've loosened up in my middle age, we'll say.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I'm still very much an editor at heart, so I like to have things consistent. But yeah, if the person who, and I do, it's like, yeah, the gun, not the ja. But hey, the person who made it, and what is it? It's the graphics interface
Interchange format, I think.
format, something like that.
Yep.
So the G in graphics is a good, but I'm good with GIF. So something like that. Hey, you know what? There are bigger fish to fry in the world. So
Oh yeah, definitely.
like I know for you, IDP is huge, and I'm gonna admit I don't play IDP mostly because I'm already maxed out on the number of leagues I'm in. Though I keep though friend of the show, Shane Barrett, has threatened to add IDP to his Polly's playoff, and I told him that I can't not play in Polly's playoffs, so because I already signed up. So if he's going to do that, I said, look, I'll just get Aaron Donald on there. But speaking of which, I'm intrigued by his value, Aaron Donald, the GOAT. So many people. I'm for one that he's the best defensive player in the NFL right now, one of the best I've ever seen. But you know what? Those guys don't always stack up when it comes to fantasy. The best, the best. I mean, Tom Brady wasn't number one, but he's considered the GOAT. How does the IDP scoring and ranking kind of rank Aaron Donald, number 99? And does it do justice to his greatness?
So it all depends on sort of what you want to get out of a league. You can find leagues that have very balanced scoring just across defenses, so positions are kind of evened out, and the cream of the crop at each position will be worth a lot. You can have it so that your defense scores about the same as your offensive players, which I find really interesting, and I'm not in a whole lot of those because finding people to play in those is difficult. But, sort of like if you would try to even it out across the offensive positions, it gives you more flexibility in how you want to build your team instead of just focusing like on a quarterback in a super flex league or something. So there's all sorts of different ways. If you have specific interior defensive linemen or defensive tackles, a guy like him, his value is going to go way up because, to your point, he's the GOAT. He's amazing. And, throughout his career, he's probably averaging between 40 and 50 solo tackles for the most part, double-digit sacks, double-digit tackles for a loss. He does everything that you'd want out of a defensive lineman. And if you have something like that, that's going to just increase his value a ton. Now, dynasty-wise, it's the same thing on the defensive side of it, where he's getting up there a little bit in age. And is he probably everyone's defensive tackle or defensive lineman one? No, most places he isn't. If you're in redraft leagues, Certainly he's still up there. But, when he starts talking about retirement potentially coming up after the Super Bowl and all that, people get scared off a little bit. And this past year really was pretty much a banner year for him when you go all the way across the board. It wasn't his best. I think that was like 2018 where he had over 20 sacks.
Oh, yes.
Didn't have that many this year, but he had a career high in tackles. He was like in the 80s for tackles, which is, 20 or 30 more than he's had throughout his career. So, there's value in that. So it's really hard to say. It's league specific, like pretty much everything else, but he's still up there. If you want to talk about top defensive linemen, that does translate over.
And how many positions do you play in that?
Yeah, again, completely varies. The basic sort of standard, if you want to like dip your toes into it, is 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 2 defensive backs, and then maybe a flex or something.
Oh, okay.
So right there, you're not starting, compared to most leagues for offense, as many defensive players. So not necessarily something you're going to be reaching for early in the draft unless that scoring is bumped up to even them out or close to even them out with offensive players, which again, a lot of players that are starting don't do that because it is something new and it's hard to, just have that monkey wrench thrown in. They're like, how do I value, Bobby Wagner and Aaron Donald compared to Nick Chubb or something like that? It's much harder diagnosis for people that aren't familiar with defense, but getting your toes just in it with even, one defensive lineman, one linebacker, and one safety. That way everyone in the league can pretty much have a stud if they want one. That's a fun way to go about it. That way you're not having to worry about digging through this whole list of, all right, who's going to end up being a bye week fill-in or something, because for the most part, you can still find guys that are highly productive. That's probably the best way, I think, to get into it, is dip your toes into it and see if you like it.
Oh, awesome. Well, I mean, like I said, I'll probably be dipping my toes. I'll probably be hitting you up for advice when Pauly's playoff draft time comes around to see who I need, and I'll be checking out. Now, make sure to tell everybody where they can find your content on IDP.
Yeah, so rotoheat.com, my rankings, I have articles, all that stuff is over there. And then Monday nights during the off season at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern on Roto Heat's YouTube, we have an IDP show. And then with Gridiron Ratings, pretty much all year round, and that would be at 9 Central, 10 Eastern on Tuesdays. There's a show that I host for Gridiron Ratings with Gary, the IDP tipster. They he had seen me and we connected, and he asked me if I wanted to host a show because he likes doing shows, but he doesn't like hosting them. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a try. And I've been doing that for almost a year now with him, and it's worked out really well. So,
muy bien. I love it. Love it. Hey, you know what? More shows out there, more content, more stuff to picture, and learn from. So,
yep.
So also, you're in Wisconsin, but you grew up a Cowboy fan. Can you give us a quick summation how that happened?
The best guess that we have, and by we I mean my family, is that I was rebelling against my parents, and the Cowboys were the cool team in the early 90s, the flashy up and coming team, and Packers were having problems beating them and all that. And they think I just went with the cool flashy team instead of the hometown team to make my dad upset. I don't remember doing that. Kind of makes sense. Having kids of myself and seeing some of the things that they do to try to upset you on any given day. But also, I do recall growing up watching football, not liking Brett Favre at all. And I think that probably turned me off to the Packers in general, just because, he was their quarterback for 15 years or whatever it was. So,
yeah, somehow he outlasted, Troy Aikman who only beat him to the league by a couple of years. So,
yeah,
that one. And what's funny is when the Rams left LA in '95, I jumped over to the Packers largely because of Favre. And the Packers were my NFC team and the Dolphins were my AFC team so I was following the quarterbacks, Dan Marino at the time. Yep. So, but yeah, that's interesting. So, okay, so I'm going to have one NFL draft question, just specific to the Cowboys. Do you want to see them go receiver in the first round?
Do I want them to? No. I think that they have enough right now with Lamb and Gallup, and they could probably find someone in a later round if they really felt necessary to fill that third spot. They need to shore up their offensive line. Yes. For years they had, Frederick, they had Martin, they had Tyron Smith, and I'm forgetting someone else, but they just built up through their offensive line, and they've let it. Guys get older, guys get banged up, guys leave, and it's just a shell of what it used to be. And if they don't try about fixing it now, we've seen, sorry, Bengals fans out there, but your offensive line can keep your quarterback from doing what they do best, and eventually it catches up with you. And I just think that's going to end up being what happens to Dallas if they don't pay attention to it. And they've had good success in the first round when they go take a guy. They haven't really had a bust in quite a while as far as a first-round pick on the offensive line. So I think if there's a guy that they like and they take him, they're going to be able to plug him in, and it'll be good. And there should be some good guys available on that offensive line in this draft. Maybe not your top tackles, but a center or a guard, something like that they can put in there. And, man, start on that interior with Zach Martin already there. Get Tyron Smith a little bit of help. He could probably still, be a top left tackle if he's healthy. So that's what I would do.
You know what? And you never go wrong when you're shoring up the trenches, when you're fixing getting those guys. In fact, one of those things, you talk about IDP. I wonder when people are going to come up with offensive line leagues. So
they do exist. I played in a free one. It was probably 8 years ago.
Really?
On MFL, they have an option for you to have offensive linemen, and you can pick categories like sacks allowed, pancakes of the defensive player, all sorts of just weird stuff like that. And it was fun to try, but it got too complicated for me even back then, and I haven't tried it since.
I wonder. Yeah, I may be curious to it. I'll it's one of those things where it's just like I love offensive
punter leagues too. So, I mean, you could have an entire, literally everyone on the field at a given time mattering for someone's fantasy league if you wanted to. You can have head coaches on MFL too, and I don't know how you grade that, if it's just a win or a loss or challenges won or lost or what they include, but I've seen that as an option on there too. So you could pretty much have literally an entire NFL team to pay attention to if you wanted.
Yeah, I heard kicker and punter leagues are huge in Spain, of all things. So I'm like, okay, you guys enjoy that. Johnny Hecker's left the Rams, so I don't know any punters anymore. So we'll just see on that one. So you've also got a busy day job, father of 5, creating fantasy content. How do you balance it all?
I have an understanding wife who, I sort of know where her limit is and how much I can do in a given day or a given week. And kids' schedules being pretty well down of, okay, they leave at this time, get them to school, do what I need to during the day. I'll be honest, working from home has probably been the biggest blessing in terms of being able to do this with my day job. The pandemic started in 2020. It was right around the time that I started doing content anyway, but we got sent home from work because they were starting to roll out work from home as a pilot program. And then the pandemic came and like, nope, we're just sending everyone and hoping it works. And it did work. And they've told us, yeah, we have no intention of bringing people back to the office. They're selling off the office buildings. It's all going to be from home, which makes it a lot easier with cutting down on the commute time. If something else comes up where I need a half day of work or whatever, I don't have to drive. It's a half-hour drive or whatever there and back anyway. And taking the kids to school, picking them up. It's helped me have more time with the kids in general, which then leaves me a little bit more time on the back end for fantasy stuff if I want.
Yeah, I mean, just think about that. That 1 extra hour can just be the difference for you if you manage your time right. So love it. Love it. Hey, I'm all for working from home, especially out here in California. Gas has been pushing $6 a gallon.
It's crazy.
Even at Costco is 5 1/4 this morning. So, gotta love
and that's
that.
coming down.
That's coming down. And it's funny. Yeah, it was, forget it. Oh, I don't even want to. Yeah, thankfully, it's just right now, for the most part, I'm just driving to pick up my kid to and from to pick up my kids and doing this stuff from home. So love it. So last one before we get into our news section, also called Cheesemate, is fantasy content. What's your favorite part about it? About creating it?
The interaction, meeting people like yourself and others on Twitter, or not as much through Facebook because I don't really use Facebook anymore, but even Discords, like you jump in a Discord that a fantasy community has, you can meet new people and you see people talking about things that you may never thought of. So those connections, those relationships that you start to build, and then also just having it make me a better fantasy player in terms of I'm seeing more things that I wouldn't think of on my own. I'm able to dig into stuff more and then share that out with other people. We're all in this together. At least we should be, as opposed to, fighting. Yeah, I know it's nice to win a league, but most people don't win whatever league you're in specifically each year. And it doesn't have to be a fight or anything personal unless you're playing with friends and you really want to beat them. But, random leagues with people, it's good to win them. But learning and growing and those relationships matter more for me at this point because I'm not playing high stakes leagues either. I guess that does matter.
Yeah, exactly. That's you nailed it right on the head. Just the people you meet, and I feel like I learn from other people, and I love that part. And you're right. It makes you a better analyst. It makes you a better player, and I think it just makes you overall better. And I love it that way. I mean, and it's not, and it's learning from people who are coming up like you and me, all the way to the ones who have done this for years and years and years, even like the film watchers like Greg Cosell and stuff like that. I want to be looking at things like them. So yes, I agree, totally agree. So I hinted at it. It's so today we're talking about new faces and new places. Well, I'm going to launch our Cheesemate section. Cheesemate is Spanish word for gossip, which we call our news section. So the biggest news of what is largely a quiet week on the NFL calendar. This is kind of like that week after the league championship games, but before Super Bowl week goes crazy. Deebo Samuel demands a trade. Is he going anywhere? I mean, I know, being a Cowboy fan and living in Packer country, so you've got no love from the 49ers in either way.
That's true.
So, no one, a month ago, no one thought that wide receiver ones were going to be moving, and then all of a sudden we got two huge icebergs moving, which we're going to talk about. He's asked to go. Do you really see him going? I mean, this is what they're giving up from last year: 136 touches, 1,770 total yards, 14 touchdowns, 21.2 fantasy points per game. He was the wide receiver 3. I mean, can they afford to trade him?
I do think from what we've just seen, this whole sort of just wide receiver movement, for the past month, seemingly, of these people saying, all right, either give me a big contract or get me out of here. I think someone would offer the 49ers enough that if they like the package and where they were sending them, because I think they'd probably prefer to send them to the AFC, so it's not coming back to bite them as often. I could see them moving him because I think there is a way that Shanahan has seen to use him that they want to use him, and it really feels to me from what I've read and seen from some of his words that that's not how he wants to be used. He wants to be a wide receiver, and he's smart about it. I mean, to me, I wouldn't want to be used like a running back in the NFL if I came in as a wide receiver with that much frequency, a little bit here and there. Yeah, I can understand. I think that makes sense to keep defenses on their toes. But man, I mean, we even saw like in that game where they beat Green Bay in the snow. I mean, he got banged up in that game, and was having issues, and he's had issues just being banged up throughout his career. So I think he's smart and like, I'm going to make more money as a big name wide receiver. I can probably last longer doing that, and if it's in his best interest and they're not going to use him that way, why not try it? He's seen it be successful for other receivers here. And if he thinks he's, even just a tier below those guys, maybe he thinks he's in that tier, shoot for it. See what you can get. See if he can go somewhere where if he feels he's going to be more appreciated in his mind, good on him. And I think the 49ers, yeah, they may be breaking in Trey Lance, but you can find another young wide receiver to stick in there with him, maybe somebody that they feel fits differently or better with them. I don't really know what they're thinking, but they also just lost their offensive coordinator. Maybe it is time to switch it up a little bit.
Oh yeah, Mr. Scamper said it right. Yeah. None of their RBs seem to be able to stay healthy. I mean, Elijah Mitchell missed several games. I think you're right. I mean, it's tough. I even heard something today that he doesn't want to. That San Francisco is too far away from his home in South Carolina, so he wants to get somewhat close. Which kind of wow, that I hadn't heard that, but it was coming from Daniel Jeremiah's Move the Sticks podcast. So, I'm gonna believe that one, but. Yeah, I want to say, guys, he's so unique that they're not going to be that they can't afford to move him. But I think you're right. Shanahan is one of those guys. Like I made Deebo Samuel. I made Brandon Ayuk. Maybe I can maybe I could turn Ayuk into Deebo last year and then grab another guy right behind him. He's a wide receiver guru. So that one's. But
he's an unrestricted free agent after this year.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
tier 4.
Yeah, you could get a comp pick. He was a second-round pick, so they don't have that fifth-year option. If you know he doesn't want to be there, he doesn't want to come back. I know there's things that they can do where, they can fine him and he can lose that year of free agency. But, he's not a big guy. I don't think he's built to stand up to that constant running back punishment. And to Mr. Scamper's point, if none of their running backs can stay healthy, and I feel like this is more realistic for some teams in various sports. Sometimes there's something with the coaching staff, and I'm not going to go out there and say that San Francisco has a bad coaching staff or something, or the training staff, but there's something going on there with their running backs where they can't stay healthy for whatever reason. And we've seen that with other teams and other positions before. Like sometimes something weird just hits you for a season. We saw that with Baltimore secondary this year, the linebackers for Pittsburgh, some of these just get decimated. That happens. But over the course of several years, if your whole running back room is constantly getting hurt, there's something else going on there. And he has a way better idea of it than either of us. But if he's kind of feeling like that's something that matters, maybe there's something to that too.
Yeah, I tell you, I think so we've got some teams that are looking that have extra draft picks. You got the Jets, the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Packers all have a pair of round 1 draft picks. Is there one that you think would be the favorite, or somebody off the board?
So the Jets clearly want to make a move from who they've tried to, or they've put offers out for and tried to get so far this offseason. So I could certainly see them trying it. I don't think they'd send him to the Packers. I think the price that they would want from the Packers for him would be prohibitive from the Packers, and I just don't think that those two would make good bedfellows. So I don't see that one happening. Deebo with the Eagles, even as a Cowboys fan, I have to say, would be interesting considering, they have Hurts at quarterback that brings that speed element that, can move around and guys get open. Same thing with Devonta Smith already. That one would be really interesting. And that, my fandom aside, would be really fun to watch, I think. I don't know if he wants to necessarily go there. Devonta Smith kind of feels already a little bit like him with how he would be used there, but maybe. I'd say that's probably the third most likely out of the four you named off. And then the Chiefs, I don't know if they really want to go out and make that kind of move. If they really thought that he would be a great fit replacement, that they could re-sign him, yeah, maybe, a little bit younger version of Tyreek Hill that they could use all across and maybe as a running back a little bit, because we know they haven't had the best luck of running backs lately either. But I'd probably say the Jets, Chiefs, and Eagles in that order.
I can see that. I think the Jets are. I think you're right. I think there's a fit. Saleh was was the defensive coordinator.
Yep.
Mike LaFleur, Matt's younger brother, was the wide receiver coach and offensive coordinator for the 49ers. So he's worked a lot with Deebo and seen that development. So I think there's some value in the past relationship there. So and they were hot and heavy for Tyreek Hill. So they want a stud wide receiver, and it's an arms race in the AFC East. So you got Diggs in Buffalo, you got Hill going to Miami. I'm not going to call Devontae Parker going to New England. I'm not going to put that on. Yeah, it's something. Exactly. So maybe they want to do their own arms race. So yeah, let me see. What does Mr. Scamper say? I could see that too. But man, I mean, after what I've seen in the last month, after what we're going to talk about in a minute, I'm going to believe everything. So
I think Deebo's more likely to be there next year than Jimmy G.
Yes,
his contract is up. I could see him sticking around this year, certainly, and I know that would put a stink on a lot of people's plans for this year with Trey Lance. But man, it just seems like they're saying that he isn't ready. And if you already have another guy under contract, who knows? Maybe Jimmy G gets hurt and he has to go in and play. I don't think they're going to get what they want for Jimmy G. So yeah. I do think he sticks around this year.
Yeah, not especially coming off the shoulder surgery. I just don't see. I don't see him moving. It's going to be impossible to move him. I think what's going to end up happening is you wonder if they might even have to eat some of that contract. So before we get into it, this was a funny in the morning. I'm going to make a fried chicken and Kraig breakfast burrito.
I didn't get that one personally. If you want to elaborate, Mr. Scampers, I'm clearly missing something.
Yeah, I think yeah. So is it supposed to be fried chicken and eggs? So yeah. So that one, Mr. Scampers, if you want to throw a comment in there, please feel free. So, but yeah, let's talk about new faces and new places. So we talked about the draft. It's not for a week. I think we're all pretty much done with a lot of the movement. We'll see what happens with Deebo Samuel. But we're going to see where players are going to land. We're going to see kind of what wide receiver rooms, what running back rooms, what's going to happen. And I've got a group of wide receivers that I wanted to focus on here. Players who changed teams. With so much up in the air, and we still have lots of forecast after the NFL draft, but I wanted to see if we could kind of open up the crystal ball. And we're going to start with something that happened kind of in Kraig's backyard and, well, kind of leaving your backyard. Devonta Adams going to the Raiders. This was the wide receiver 2 last year, one of the best. For my money, even though I'm a Ram fan and loved what Cooper Kupp did, I still put Devonta Adams as the best wide receiver in the NFL. 1,553 yards last year, 123 receptions, 11 touchdowns, but moving to Las Vegas. And, mi amigo, you got the Raiders with 181 vacated targets, and Carr made 628 total attempts last year. Going to the Josh McDaniels offense, new offensive minded coach, familiar quarterback, receiver. How do you see this one shaking out? I just don't. This one worries me a little bit.
So I've seen a lot of people talking about how they've really dropped Devonta Adams in their rankings because of this. And I guess I'm not of the same thought personally. We've seen what he's capable of when you get the ball in his hand. And to me, it's not like he's going to a complete unknown. Now, yes, he played with Carr in college. But if he has that much of a relationship where he basically forcing his way out of Green Bay, where he's playing with a future Hall of Famer and a guy that we know is going to feed him the ball and, probably is a great bet to get Adams to the Hall of Fame or try to get him there statistically. if you're going to move to Las Vegas to play with a guy you haven't played in, whatever year, like 8 years or 9 years, something like that, and you're going to buy a house right next door to him, they clearly have a connection. So I'm not afraid that Derek Carr, one, isn't going to feed him the ball, or two, McDaniels is not going to use Adams in the way that we saw similarly to Green Bay. There are better options around Adams in Vegas than there were Green Bay. With no offense to the guys in Green Bay, Waller and Renfrow have proven more than the whole lot of those guys in Green Bay recently. That said, McDaniels didn't go out and they didn't pay Derek Carr all that money. They didn't pay Devonta Adams all that money to just sit there and run the ball. I think he is going to open it up more, and I think that's also going to be a factor of he really didn't have the ability with that Patriots team last year to open it up that much. They were going to be a run-based team, and I think, to your point, they're going to need to throw the ball a lot with that division that they're in. Their defense still is suspect, and there's other teams in there are going to be able to put points up on them. So, yeah, they're going to have to be chucking the ball, I think. And I think it's going to do great things for Adams, Renfrow, and Waller. And on the other hand, we know guys get hurt. Who's not to say, we're not predicting it, but sometimes those targets that we think are going to go to Waller or Renfrow or whoever don't end up going there. And, you have Foster Moreau in there who just isn't going to get the same target share as Waller.
I think you're right. I mean, they're going to be in some shootouts next year. I think the Chiefs are still going to be formidable. The Chargers are going to be stacked, I think. And, we got Denver. That's 8 games, almost half their games right there are going to be just knockdown, drag out, heavyweight battles. I think you're right. I was looking, the Patriots had a very even pass to rush ratio, 535 passes, 489 rushing attempts. I still like good things for Josh Jacobs next year, but I think we're going to see more than 600 passes from Derek Carr, and I think it's going to be at least 10 targets a game. I was a little worried. Then, you started talking, and I was kind of like, oh, you know what? Yeah, it's going to be they're DBs. We don't know how good they're going to be next year. Yeah, there's going to be a lot going on. I think he's definitely going to bring down Hunter Renfrow's value. I think Darren Waller's still going to be a guy who may be a little bit undervalued because he missed some time last year, but no, I could see this one. He's the wide. I think he's definitely still at least top 5, but it's hard to put him down even below number 4. Really, I mean,
I've seen people drop him down into the late teens.
Oh my gosh!
And
Eso está loco.
Even if you want to say that's for dynasty, to me, that's too low for dynasty, because we've seen wide receivers like that, still have a good 5-6 years left in them. And I'm not willing to discount that relationship that they have. And the other opponents that they have, so we know they're playing in those shootouts against their division. They are playing the AFC South with that whole mess as far as, the Colts look like they're probably going to have a decent defense. You're going up against Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee's defense has issues. So those are other teams that they're going to be able to potentially just put up points on.
Oh, that's going to be fun. We got some friends in the chat. Rumboys Robbie, Rumboys Fantasy. Muchas gracias. Dilly. Everybody, Rumboys After Dark, Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
I've been on it. Enjoy it. After you watch Player Normal, have the rest of your day, and then catch Rumboys After Dark, and also our amigos at 32-bit. Muchas gracias. Salud, everybody. Salud. And we're drinking to you later. So let's go to Miami, little South Florida. Tyreek Hill. That one was the one that happened, and it felt like his trade demand happened at 9:00 in the morning out west, and by 9:30 he was traded. So this is the guy who was wide receiver 7 last year, 159 total targets, averaged about 10 a game because I think he missed a game, 111 catches, 1,239 yards, 9 touchdowns. He had 5 top 5 finishes. Now he's going to Tua. Tua was QB 26 last year. He missed 4 games. So, and part of 5th. So 3. It's kind of hard to measure out his passing attempts, but again, I mean, this is one of those ones where you talked about following the money, follow the dinero, and this is now the high. He's now the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. You had Mike McDaniels calling plays last year in San Francisco, where another even pass to run ratio, but again, are we following the money on this one again? I mean, where you're going from a quarterback who threw 650 over 650 passes to one who maybe was on, maybe looking at 550 last year if he would have played 17 games. Are they going to just fire it up with him and Jalen Waddle?
So I am a little bit more down on Hill than Adams, but I don't think it's a huge gap either. To your point, the money, you're going to what was an offensive coordinator, now the head coach that everyone just had glowing things to speak about, who I think is going to be able to find unique ways to get him and Waddle and Gesicki, which, all three of those guys, if you sort of put their target shares together from the past year, I think it would end up being like 68 to 70% or something, just combined if they were on one team. That's still feasible in today's NFL, where you have these other parts ending up with a 30% target share if the rest of them were to remain healthy. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, that's probably a bit high. But there's still going to be enough volume, I think. And I still believe in Tua. I think the guy got a bad rap because he was hurt. The whole left-handed thing, people love. See it now with the draft, to pick apart some of these guys. McDaniel went there with a plan for Tua. I believe that. Now, it's the same sort of thing if you want to think about Jalen Hurts. Maybe they're just going to give him a year or two, and if he doesn't come around to it, they move on. We've seen teams do that quickly before, even Miami, and moving on from Tannehill, who ended up being a decent quarterback. So do I think Tua is guaranteed a spot for the next 2-3 years? No, but I do think he's going to get a fair shot here, and he's going to have the weapons around it and a head coach that is smart enough to utilize Tua and his weapons in ways to make them succeed. So I don't think Hill is probably going to have that same success that he had in Kansas City, just because it's a different type of quarterback. With all respect to Tua, he's not Mahomes.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's just going to be this huge drop off that people are predicting with what the change that we've seen and how he's being valued from KC to Miami.
And you know what? We also remember when he was in Alabama, I mean, he had speed merchants all around him.
Yep.
So, and he's going to be now more than 2 years removed from that hip injury that, people were really worried about. So I really am intrigued by him. I don't think he's going to have that Konami code, but I think on Superflex leagues, I'm really going to want Tua to be at the very least my third quarterback, and possibly I'll take my chances with him as my second quarterback.
Yep.
I think that's going to be, I don't know if I buy into the Dolphins using Tua. I mean, using Hill like in that Deebo role with running sometimes. I don't, maybe jet sweeps, but I don't see him lining up in the backfield and taking direct handoffs that way, or even pitches or something like that. But yeah, I want to see him getting the ball, but I think this one's going to be a more crowded room. With Jalen Waddle is going to demand some touches, and Gesicki. There's never been that second wide receiver that really has taken targets away from Hill. So it's I'm intrigued by the Dolphins and this move. I think it's something that I think is going to be fun. So, and Robbie, you're right. Tua better get Tyreek the damn ball. So I'm going to drink some rum to you on that.
And I don't believe that Hill would just be, completely fine. He hasn't been out here complaining about going to Miami. If he wasn't aware, like, okay, they have this head coach now. He did great things here with San Francisco. Everybody says he's one of the smartest guys in any room that he's in. They got a plan. He agreed to go there to get this whole contract and everything. They talked to him before they just, went ahead and did that. So I have to imagine that, for now things change. They're all on board. And to the point about the running backs, they brought in enough running backs that I think they're going to be able to find something that works between Mostert, Edmonds. I think Gaskin is still there. It's not going to be pretty, and nothing I'm really going to want a whole lot of in terms of fantasy, but for NFL usefulness, I think that'll be fine.
Oh, well, let's go to my backyard on the next one. Allen Robinson, the second. And this is not his second life. This is his third life, his third team.
Yeah.
And
first year, real team, let's be honest.
First real quarterback. I mean, last year, do you just throw it all away? Wide receiver 82. I don't even want to get into the stats because, it's just, he played 12 games. I mean, it was just ugly. It was just ugly. Yeah. I think this is one of those ones you just flush it down the toilet. He battled hamstring issues. He had COVID for a period of time, and they say he lost like a bunch of weight during COVID. But again, Fields and Dalton upgrading to Matthew Stafford. So I look at this one, and this is a guy whose current ECR is expert consensus ranking is wide receiver 36. He's in the age 29 season. And I did a little looking. He had 100. The Rams have 132 vacated targets from Robert Woods, OBJ, and Deshaun Jackson. I think it's pretty clear that Cooper Kupp is the number one guy, but
Yep.
Allen Robinson, are you buying him early on in maybe best ball and maybe some early drafts before
I love
things
him
maybe
where he's
get
going. Robinson, for the first time in his career, isn't going to have to be the guy at wide receiver with a whole bunch of yuck along with him. He survived Blake Bortles, and he had fantasy useful years because he was just the guy with the ball being chucked to him, and they didn't have a whole lot else. A lot of his time in Chicago was similar. I know Mooney came on here. But to your point, that was just a terrible year all around for Chicago. You had, Mooney that was pretty fantasy relevant. Montgomery went healthy, and that was about it. I don't think that he's fallen off a cliff, he being Robinson, and I think he will be rejuvenated, kind of like we saw with Odell Beckham, going to that team where he doesn't have to be the number one, and he has a quarterback that's going to get him the ball and knows how to use good receivers. And even if Odell does end up coming back there once he's healthy as that third receiver, how are you going to defend those three on the field at the same time? They're all veteran receivers that know what they're doing, know how to get open, and I'm looking forward to the Allen Robinson renaissance. What do you say, is like 36 or 32, something like that. I'd be buying him up all over.
I'm going to take him all over. And, about a month ago, I had Dr. Edwin Porras on, and we were talking about all those late season ACL injuries. And we were talking about OBJ being one of them, getting hurt in the middle of February. And a lot of times it's taken 10 months to get back from at least 10 months for them to start thinking about that. So that's December. We're pushing Christmas at that point, and that's not a lot of season left. So that's why I love Robinson, even if they do re-sign OBJ. I think I'm looking at OBJ more for 2023. I think really his only competition, at least early on, is going to be Van Jefferson and Tutu Atwell, who didn't get any receptions last year, but he does have the draft capital for round 2 last year. So, but really, I mean, yeah, I share your enthusiasm.
I think like half of his seasons, Robinson's been a wide receiver 1 or something like that, with just some atrocious teams that he's been on. So yeah, I know that can cut both ways, where if you're the only guy, you're getting fed the ball because you're behind and stuff. But again, we saw it already, a really good offense. Look at the Bengals. They can support 2 top 15 wide receivers or whatever, T. Higgins fell into there. I don't see it as a downgrade in any way for Robinson's career. I see it as the opposite.
Not at all. Well, I think the next one, Amari Cooper going to the Browns. This one, I know this one hit, cuts a little close to your Cowboy fandom. So, a salary dump for a 5th round pick, and he had a down year, battled some injuries. You could talk to the injuries, but he's only a year removed from an 1,100 yard season with almost 100 receptions. He's going his age 28 season. I don't think it's an upgrade because Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson are kind of on the same tier. But those vacated targets, I counted up 229 vacated targets on the Browns, and they don't have a first round pick. So, are we seeing Robbie's talking about a resurgence? Are we seeing a resurgence from Mr. Cooper?
Depending on what happens with Watson.
Yeah.
So we don't need to go into all that because, we don't really have any idea. And I don't think the NFL has any idea. If Watson isn't playing a large part of the season for whatever reason, it's going to hurt Cooper. That said, he's had 2 seasons in his career where he has not hit 70 receptions. 2017 in Oakland and this past year. Other than that, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5, 6 seasons that he's had over 1,000 yards, and he's been at a minimum a useful wide receiver 2 for you in fantasy, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be that again, where, to your point, there's so many vacated targets there that, even if you don't believe in vacated targets, because I know that's a taboo thing for some people out there in fantasy football, there are targets that are going to be available to go somewhere for guys that are no longer on the team. And they didn't give up all that and pay Watson all of that money, guaranteed to have him just hand off the ball. They're not going to go away from the running game because they have a great running game and they shouldn't go away from it. But they're going to air the ball out more if Watson is healthy. So I think it's a calculated risk you got to take. Okay, do I want to bet on Watson being out there half of the year or more? If I don't, what do I think about Cooper? Because what is it? Jacoby Brissett, maybe I think is the backup there, or they're expecting anyway. He's been all right. He's not the dregs of NFL backups. He's a veteran that knows how to get the ball to some guys. So I just have a hard time doing anything other than the running game in Cleveland with just the murkiness of that whole situation. But if we assume Watson plays, yeah, I mean, Cooper still has wide receiver 1 tier potential. So,
and plus he has those blow up games anyway. So he always seems to have them. He did it with the Raiders. He did it with the Cowboys. You know it very well. He'd have 200-yard game and then 2 receptions the following week. So I think, but yeah, I'm a believer in the vacated targets when they're when coming in someone of Amari Cooper's talent and caliber. And again, we talked about following the money. They're not paying him to run wind sprints out there. So I love the possibility of him coming up. This next one is we got Juju Smith-Schuster going to KC, and he's had 2 lost seasons. And I think it's easy for people to forget that in 2018, he had 111 receptions and 1,426 yards, but he's battled injuries. He's still 25. And we're now seeing Tyreek Hill taking his 159 targets and his talents to Miami. And again, we're talking about Patrick Mahomes throwing 658 passes. They've lost Byron Pringle. They've lost DeMarcus Robinson, lost Josh Gordon. I know they're talking about draft picks for him, about using draft picks on wide receivers, but what's your level of excitement on Juju going to KC?
So I've never been someone that's been highly excited by Juju or probably excited at all. I didn't buy into him in the draft when he went to, I think it was the 2nd round, and he went to Pittsburgh. And to your point, he had some good seasons, especially that second season, 2018 in Pittsburgh. But since then, it's been sort of blah. I mean, even his best year since then out of the 3 was 2020, but he was 3rd on the team in receptions. He was a little behind Chase in yards and receptions. I think they're tied with like 9 touchdowns apiece. He could have a resurgence in KC, and I know they were looking at him last year, and he ended up going back to Pittsburgh to run it back. So they clearly have some interest in him there. Much better situation. There's no doubt about that in terms of quarterback play, because Big Ben just didn't have it anymore. And then you're going to top 1-2 quarterback in the league in Mahomes. I think Reed's going to try to utilize Juju and see what they have in him to see if this is a longer term investment because of his age, where they could give him a 5-year contract and then he ends up being 30 or 31 at the end of it. Still a good deal for the team. I just need to see more consistency out of him season to season. Before I'm going out there for fantasy purposes, going to believe in him as even a wide receiver 2 for my team week in and week out.
I think it is kind of funny. He's only 4 spots behind Allen Robinson in ECR right now. So it's, I think there is some excitement for him going to KC, but this one's one that I really want to see what that wide receiver room looks like after the draft. This is a team that's got 6 picks in the first 103 picks, and this is another heavy wide receiver draft. I think this is going to be a fun team to kind of project on, because you can dream on like a Christian Watson or somebody like that catching passes from Patrick Mahomes. I think it'd be exciting, or a Treylon Burks or something like that. Those guys fall into there, and all of a sudden the believers will come out. But I still think this is going to be Travis Kelce's is going to be the main guy. I think he's going to be averaging about 10 targets a game, and beyond that, I think it's going to be a lot of sharing, because I think the wide receivers are going to. The rookies are going to take some time to kind of flourish a little bit, to kind of find themselves. But no, uh, it's still going to be fun. KC is still going to be formidable.
When you're comparing him to Robinson, I actually did over on Roto Heat, we had a dynasty battle where it was two receivers that were close, like you said, sort of in rankings, and one person took one side and one took the other, and then we argued for our player, and you can decide in the comments who wins, sort of thing. And it was actually Allen Robinson versus Juju, and I had the Allen Robinson side. And does this mean anything long term? No, but I found it kind of funny that even with the terrible season Robinson had, and yes, Juju had an abbreviated season, Robinson still had more points per game than Juju did over those 5 games. That's just how bad that Steelers team was, and Big Ben not utilizing him. So, man, it can be bad for these guys. And we've seen teams in free agency have wide receivers change teams, and it just go to complete crap when we're expecting stuff. So, again, I'm not hoping or saying that'll happen, but there is some worry about just that adjustment to the new team, new quarterback, because he'd been with Big Ben for 5 years or something like that. There's a big difference between the two of them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't expect a receiver to kind of become a number one who's never been a number one, and no matter where he's going. I mean, when Juju had that big season, Antonio Brown was also one of the best receivers in the NFL that year too. In fact, that was his last great year. Thank you for winning me a championship that year. Muchas gracias. I remember that one very well. But yeah, it's still Travis Kelce. I'm going to heavily invest in Travis Kelce on teams where I'm going to go where I'm going to go early on tight end. But really, I think I'm going to be taking chances on some of the guys that are maybe the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 that they're taking out there. So,
and if you really believe in Juju, he's not on your team, wait until after the draft. If they take 2 wide receivers early, you still believe in them, you're going to be able to get them at a discount more than right now. So,
love it. Well, last guy is a guy that I think I'm very intrigued by, Russell Gage. So, wide receiver 38, not very exciting, but from weeks 12 to 18 in Atlanta, he was the wide receiver 10. He had 45 catches on 60 targets, 562 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, averaged 18.5 fantasy points per game. Really, his only competition at that point was Kyle Pitts and a fading Cordarrelle Patterson. And now he's going to Tom Brady, who threw the ball 719 times last year. So, I mean, just total passes just from a pure volume standpoint. And then you look at the fact that you got Mike Evans as his primary target, Chris Godwin, another player who got hurt late in the season. So I'm not expecting, I could see him being at least the half season before he's maybe active and maybe even contributed. And I counted 143 vacated targets for him. This is a guy, his ECR is 48 right now. And, at least for the beginning of the season, this guy's got me. In Spanish, it's saying "me hace cosa." He gives me some tingles. So, am I right to do that?
I think so. He's sort of been an under the radar guy his whole career. Even when he's had big games, because he's been on that just gross Atlanta team by and large for most of it. Tom Brady did not come back and say, "Oh, my heart's still in it," to hand the ball off the whole time. He's still going. He wants to set those records that are never going to be beaten, because that's the kind of guy that he is. He wants to be out there throwing the ball as long as his body's going to let him. Whether or not Gronk comes back, I think, is a big part of this. And who knows with that guy? He's smart. He saves his money. He's got tons of money just squirreled away, because, he had the same car, from college until that thing ran into the ground and stuff. I mean, I have no idea what Gronk wants to do. I don't think he really knows what he wants to do, but that is something to consider here, because if he is back, we know how much Brady loves him. Those two just have a connection. Mike Evans also, the main guy there at wide receiver. But while Godwin is out, I think Gage is a great pickup and a great play, probably as a wide receiver 3-4, and he could have much higher weeks than that. To your point, what he did at the end of the season when Atlanta actually got their season going on offense a little bit as far as throwing the ball downfield, he was a great play for you, for a guy that you probably got even later than wide receiver 48 with the mess that was going on in Atlanta, and the hope that people had for Ridley and Pitts and all that. He was an afterthought there too, but now he's an afterthought on a much better offense. Sign me up with where he's going right now.
Yeah, he was one guy that I kept begrudgingly recommending at for waiver wire for weekly pickups, and I just looked at I kept saying, okay, is he going to do it again? And he had the matchups and everything like that. I think he's going to be an interesting guy. And plus the one thing that I was looking at, even with a healthy Chris Godwin, with a healthy Mike Evans, and with a largely healthy Mike Gronk, Antonio Brown averaged almost 9 targets a game. So Gage, if he gets in that circle of trust, I think I grabbed him in a startup recently, and he was, I'm like, for my last flex spot. So I'm going to take some chances with him early on in the season. So,
Well, and they're paying him $10 million a year. I mean, that's not Christian Kirk money. I mean, what is these days? But that's not for nothing. When you're looking at wide receivers in the NFL either, it's not like 1 year, 2 year deal with $5 million a year or something. They clearly think he's got the ability, and I mean, they should know. They played against him, twice a year when he was with the Falcons. They saw what he could do. So I do think they have a plan for him, and if nothing else, is a great safety valve while Godwin is working his way back, and they don't really have anything else. Scotty Miller, Cyril Grayson, those sort of guys just haven't been consistently exciting. We've seen that from Gage.
Oh man, I think he's gonna, he's gonna be a guy to kind of be a little bit excited about. So, we had Dame kind of talk about DJ Chark. I didn't put him in the show doc because I talked about him recently, but being in you're in NFC North country. What's kind of the chatter as far as DJ Chark kind of coming in? I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is still gonna be very, very formidable, but two very different receivers. ASB, is gonna be in the slot, and DJ Chark is gonna be on the outside. What's your feeling on him?
I think it was Mr. Scamper. So sorry to burst your bubble. As far as my thought on it, I'm not a DJ Chark believer. In the degree that we saw that one good season out of him, and he's been on a dysfunctional Jacksonville team his entire career before that. I think this Detroit team is better than that, in that they have a better just coaching staff and philosophy and atmosphere going with what they're trying to build up there. But he doesn't fit what Jared Goff does really well as far as quarterback. That's the big thing about Goff. People said, oh, they never used him that way. Well, when he wasn't used that way in Los Angeles, St. Louis, wasn't used that way in Detroit this past year's throwing it downfield. I don't think he's suddenly going to be that quarterback that's just chucking it down the field. And there's a lot of talk of them drafting a wide receiver, whether it's at the end of the first round or in the second round. There's a lot of things that, to me, just don't excite me about DJ Chark. Even with that nice season that he had, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. The year after that, he 700 yards. Then he got hurt. I mean, he could be something, but he won't be on my team because I'm just not drafting him with enough people out there believing in him still.
And that was from Mr. Scampers. This was, and plus, also apologies for that. And I'm apologizing from because Juju was in my backyard in USC, even though I'm a UCLA fan. So 5th overall. Hey, you know what? We all learn from our lessons. I've talked to people who dropped Patrick Mahomes in 2018 right after the draft to pick up a kicker. So I know that. And just an interesting one is this from Anthony. Thank you for dropping this in the chat. Is this the year Hawkinson becomes a high-end tight end one? What does his fantasy value look like going forward? I think he's still I think he'll be a tight end one, but I think he's going to be on the back half. When I can't put him. I can't even put him close to. Maybe he's in that next tier after Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle, Pitts. I can't even have him sniff that one. But next one, is it all health? I think it's all health coming down to him.
It's health, and then health for that whole offense. That whole offense outside of their even their offensive line guys had issues with health last year. That whole team. I mean, it was the Lions. What do we expect out of them at this point? It's been their history for how long, unfortunately. But yeah, if he's healthy and Goff is healthy, and maybe they don't do any big dramatic moves. They see what they have with Amon-Ra and Chark. Yeah, he's going to be a target machine, and I think they probably end up throwing the ball just less to the running backs like Swift, because a lot of that was just out of necessity too last year because they had so many guys get hurt. So if he's healthy and that offense is healthy, I'm not expecting anything crazy like a top half of the NFL offense, but there's going to be enough targets. He'll get his receptions in. He's a red zone threat. I could see him being a top 5 tight end. If you told me that at the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised, just because of how inconsistent these things are, and we see guys get hurt and miss games. So yeah, I mean, I expect him to be a tight end 1-2. I don't expect him to be a top 5, but if he did, it wouldn't shock me if you told me that, at the end of the year.
It wouldn't shock me either. And I think by the time we hit August, I think the Kyle Pitts hype is going to be out of hand, because it's Marcus Mariota throwing him the ball. So
Yeah.
it's not Mahomes. It's not Josh Allen. It's Hawkinson could sneak in with a fully healthy season. So, and Mr. Scamper. So I'm not feeling bad for you. You had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. You did okay. You did okay. So Robbie's coming in. So yeah. So we got So yes, you're in Titletown, but I've also heard you're not, well, somewhat, you're in the state of Titletown, but I've heard from amigo of the show, Pat Fitzmaurice, that Milwaukee, there is some really good Mexican food. In your neck of the woods, any favorite dishes that you want to dish on?
So we don't really, for a few reasons, get out to eat a whole lot anymore.
Yeah.
One, outside of family, finding a babysitter for, even if you take the youngest with us, 4 kids, is a challenge. And then we're also, so I'm about halfway between Madison and Milwaukee. So it's about, 45 minutes ish to get to a really big city that most people consider a big city. So we don't get in there that often, because clearly if we're going to a nice restaurant, I'm not taking 4 kids under the age of 10 to cause chaos, because I'm just not going to enjoy myself. I'm going to be worried about what they're doing. So that said, there are some nice little more niche places, with authentic Mexican food. There's one town 10 minutes north of us that they even just got one of those big outdoor grills. Those I don't even know what the heck they call them, but those big sort of barrel looking grills, where they have the wood under and that. So they started cooking their meat on there, so you can go in and get it freshly cooked off of that. And I'm adventurous, but my wife isn't, and she always wants me to get something she can try, because she wants to be a little bit adventurous, but not get something that she knows she isn't going to want. So if I'm going out with her, I have to limit the sort of things that I get to, basically like steak, chicken. I'm more into trying shrimp and chorizo and that sort of stuff, because I like more flavors. She can't have seafood. Chorizo's too spicy for her. Being married, these are the things you run into sometimes. But man, it's, I guess, sort of just a classic type of thing. But fajitas, I just love, because it's just the variety that you get into with just that piping hot stuff. And then the kids, we have nachos all the time. I mean, not really probably authentic, but even when we go there, I'll get some of the more authentic stuff and try to get the kids to try it, as opposed to just the chips and guacamole and some salsa and cheese at home or something that they want to try.
That's the thing. Well, yeah, you are in cheese country, so you got to make sure you get
cheese
the nachos.
Is everything. Oh yeah.
You got to get them that stuff. So chorizo. Have you found al pastor?
They do have it at restaurants, but again, it's one of those things where my wife isn't moving up to. Yep, she's not up to trying that. But if I go there with buddies or stuff, I'll get it.
Okay, you gotta send me a picture of maybe my head on it or something like that.
I'm sure I can do it next time I go there.
Yeah, enjoy it, mi amigo. Santa Maria Grill. So yes, you gotta love that. What is it? Almost time. Pitt's Truth or Nerves. Ay, Dios mío. Yes. Sorry, Robbie. Well, Kraig, mi amigo, this thing has flown by. My goodness, my goodness. I was hoping for an hour, and we just got a little chatty, but had a good time. But mi amigo, let's close up shop. Please make sure to point people to where they can find your great stuff, and especially your big debut to mañana. I'm going to give it one more.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I didn't realize it was almost hour 15 minutes here. That did fly by. Pretty much everything over at rotoheat.com for any content or like rankings, articles, that stuff of mine. And then the YouTube, just Rotoheat Fantasy. That's where there's a playlist that's going to be started. You can find one or two promos for my show that I'm going to be having. Player Normal Activity dropping at 12 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. It's about a half hour long, probably each episode, with a different guest going over a player they want to talk about in the NFL and their fantasy value, and then a paranormal experience after that. So it'll be nice and chopped up. So if you have part of that you don't care to listen to, you can stick around for the part that you want to. But I've had 3 of them I've recorded so far, and it's really interesting. You know, some of these people you see on Twitter and you've gotten to know talking about fantasy, talk about something completely different. So I'm really into that. And again, I want to thank you for bringing me on here. This is a blast.
Fue un gran placer. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias for joining me. And familia, we're gonna close up shop. Please make sure, again, when you're going to fantasypoints.com, you're gonna get your subscription. Put in Familia 22, Familia 22. You get 10% off your subscription. Don't forget that NFL prospect guide. So you're going to get some of the best information that you're going to get out there. And again, make sure to like and subscribe us on YouTube, Familia FFB. Make sure you're going to Anchor to get the audio. If you want to listen to the audio, go to Apple, Google, Spotify. Thank you to Anchor for putting us out there. And again, you can find me at Jorge Martin 17 on Twitter and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Familia FFB. Our website is undergoing a little bit of construction. Hopefully we're going to have it back up and running by early next week. And I'm going to have some content going out there right after the draft, and maybe some before the draft. I got a little backed up on some of the writing, but I got some really good content coming out on some year 2 players, some zero RB stuff that we've talked about. Just yeah, exactly. I think you had that in your promo. That was that one gave me a little crack up there, Kraig, on the player normal one. So gotta love it. Remember, everybody, enjoy the last week of quiet before the draft, and remember, todos somos familia. Salud.